Hello, my fellow YouTubers and subscribers. Welcome to my latest movie review, where today I review the fifth film in the Mission Impossible film series, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Released in 2015, directed by Christopher McQuarrie. So, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, the plot of this movie is as follows. Ethan and his team take on their most impossible mission yet, when they have to eradicate an international rogue organisation as highly skilled as they are, and committed to destroying the IMF. So, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Now, if you've been following these reviews since the first one, I've kind of really enjoyed the series. I've had some mixed thoughts on some of the movies, but generally speaking, the movies have been pretty great, and I've really enjoyed the series. But of course, not every installment is going to be spectacular. Sorry to say that Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is one of the least spectacular installments. Yeah, to me, this is a very bog standard Mission Impossible film. It's by no means bad, and it's by no means great. It's just kind of decent. Yeah, I was less impressed by this one than some of the other ones. Certainly not as good as the previous movie, Ghost Protocol. Even though it's a good continuation of the story, the overall presentation of the film, to me, I was less wowed by this one. I just thought, that's kind of cool. Whereas the last one was, whoa. And I know that this film often gets compared to the James Bond movie Spectre, because these movies were released in the same year at similar times, and people accuse Spectre of ripping off Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. I think that's a very unfair criticism, because both the movies were made at the same time, and they were released in the same year, so how could they have known what the other film was going to do? I just don't think that's very fair, but that's just my own personal opinion. Basically, Ethan Hunt has to take down the Syndicate, which are this, global organisation that are causing a lot of terror, and the IMF are still disavowed, pretty much. And there's this little group of people who are trying to stop the Syndicate and reinstate the IMF, so hence the title Rogue Nation. In this film we have Tom Cruise doing his usual thing, and yeah, the guy's doing very well, as always. This one, I believe, is where he starts to show his age. He is getting a bit older, and it's going in the sideburns, going a bit grey. The most impressive stunt he has in the movie is at the very beginning, when he's hanging onto the side of a plane, as well as the moment halfway through the film where he's in that water tank and he's trying to hold his breath for quite a long time. That's quite impressive. This film introduces Rebecca Ferguson as Ilsa. Ilsa is going to become a more permanent character. She's certainly in the next movie, and I think she's going to be in Dead Reckoning Part 1, if I'm not mistaken. I like Rebecca Ferguson. She is a great actress, and she's a beautiful woman. My goodness me, if I had a celebrity crush on anybody, it would definitely be Rebecca Ferguson. Her character is very two-sided, very, well, three-sided in a lot of ways. She's very much a free-for-all. You don't really know what side she's on. I kind of like that, because it adds a lot of mystery to her character. It might become a bit tedious for certain people after a while, but I do quite like it, and I think that there is a hint towards her and Ethan sort of having a romantic interest, but it's not really taken any further in this one. It may be hinted at more in the next movie, Fallout, but as of now, it's only ever implicit. And she kicks ass. I mean, in a way, this is really her film. She gets quite a lot of screen time, she gets a lot to do, and she's especially great in the opera scene, because basically Ilsa is kind of trying to get information about the Syndicate to help bring them down, so she's pretending to work for Solomon Lane in order to destroy the Syndicate, and then she has somewhat of a role to play in deceiving Ethan and Benji and the rest of the crew. The crew this time, some of them returned from the last film, but not all of them. So we have Simon Pegg coming back as Benji. He is great in this film. He gets a lot to do in this film, and he's really the heart and soul of this film. He had a lot of comedy in the last film, but this time he's got a lot of heart and soul, and he really puts his friendship with Ethan on the line, and he has to lie to Alec Baldwin's character quite constantly in order to protect his friend Ethan. So I love the friendship between Benji and Ethan. There's some particularly great moments, particularly in the opera scene, where they're talking via the glasses, and you really feel that sense of loyalty that Benji has, and I really like that. Jeremy Renner returns as Brandt. He's not quite as good in this film, but he does get quite a bit to do, actually. He gets involved in the court subplot, where he has to try and swerve the questions of the events of the previous movie, and he has to try and keep things under wraps. And when he gets to work with Ethan and Benji again, that's really great to see, and he does play a vital role in helping track down Solomon Lane. Luther also returns. It's nice to see Luther do a bit more, because he was only a cameo in the last film, so it's nice to see him back. And Alec Baldwin is a great new addition to the cast, and I'd say what you will about Alec Baldwin, you know, as a person and with what happened with the whole shooting thing. But in this movie, he's pretty good, and he plays a good character. Although his character might end up being a little bit wasted in the next film, but we'll discuss that later. But like I said, the action of the movie, while it's good, it's not spectacular. I think the most spectacular action sequences for me are the opening scene with the plane. That's really good. And the opera scene, which some people would argue is a slight rip off of Quantum of Solace, but in a way it's better. It is better edited than Quantum of Solace's one, and the lighting is fantastic. There's a great fight scene on top of the rigging with Ethan and some guy, and when Rebecca Ferguson's character is there trying to shoot the Chancellor, you know, that's a really cool sequence, how that's all done while the opera's going on. The rest of the action is fine, but again, nothing stands out. Like there's a cool kind of chase sequence in, I think it's Morocco, and the climax isn't as action heavy as I would have expected it to be. There's less stunts in this one than any of the previous films, which is kind of surprising, and I'd forgotten how little there was, really, because I hadn't seen this film since it came out. Like, the third act felt very underdone in some respects, almost anticlimactic. I mean, don't get me wrong, the way they kidnap Solomon Lane is kind of clever, but then the film lacks any spectacle in that regard. This has the least amount of spectacle of all the first 5 films. I would have expected Ethan and Solomon to have some kind of a standoff before Solomon gets captured. But, oh well. So for me, the pacing of the movie definitely is affected, and I think there are times when you could probably cut some of these scenes out. They do drag quite a bit, and this one doesn't feel as fresh and as new as the fourth one. The fourth movie was like, wow, you know, I'm so into this. You know, this is so refreshing. This has reinvented the series. Fifth one is like, this is fine, but it's just more of the same. I didn't really feel like this movie did anything new with the franchise. It didn't really reinvigorate it. The only new thing it did really was bringing Solomon Lane and Ilsa. As for Solomon Lane, the villain, I can see that he's kind of similar to Blofeld from the James Bond movies, and that he's the guy from the shadows, you know, running the organization, kind of in the shadows, you know, trying to remain incognito. The way that Sean Harris performs the character, I can understand why he does it the way he does. To me, the kind of lower, sinister sort of voice, it doesn't come across very well when he's threatening people. It almost sounds as though he has a sore throat every time he has to speak. And, oh, I'm going to threaten Ethan Hunt and I'm going to kill him. It's very monotone, whereas Blofeld, Inspector, doesn't sound like he has a sore throat. So that's where the effect kind of works better for me. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a James Bond fan. I generally do like this film, but I do feel like Solomon Lane was almost wasted. And I do feel like they could have done something a bit more with him and made him slightly more dramatic, because against Ethan Hunt, he's not that intimidating. He's just a skinny weasel of a man who's quite clever, but that's all he is. He has his brain, and he's always one step ahead of the others, but there's not much else to him. I did quite like the scene at the beginning where Ethan gets his message, and then he, you know, realizes he gets a message from the Syndicate. They reveal themselves to him, and they say, if you hunt us, then you're going to be dead, basically. So there was tension at the beginning, but again, the momentum of the movie was kind of lost, so I felt less engaged with this one. You know, when I said in my last review that the stakes for number 4 were so high, I believed the situation and the tension was running throughout. This movie, I didn't quite feel that. I didn't quite feel the stakes were high enough, and they should have been, and that's a real problem for me, because this movie really is like, it's introducing this global threat, this organisation that are so powerful and so hidden. You know, they're everywhere, but they're not, if that makes sense. So I really felt like the film should have amplified that, should have made us believe the threat more than they did. I felt the threat in the fourth movie was more prominent than this one. And again, it all comes down to the momentum, and I think Christopher McQuarrie's direction, whilst good, could have been better, because I feel like he could have really, you know, amplified the tension, and he really could have got us hooked into the story a bit more. I just felt that I wasn't as hooked by this one, which is a real shame. Like I said, this movie is a decent effort, but it's not spectacular, and I feel like they could have put a little bit more time into the action sequences, a bit more time to the story. There are some good moments, but there's less drama than there was in the fourth one. Like, each person in the fourth movie had a personal reason for what they were doing. In this one, they're all in the same situation trying to figure out how to capture Solomon Lane, but there's less of a personal thread there. Ilsa's probably the most developed character in the film, which I suppose is a compliment, but at the same time, the others kind of get sidelined. I didn't feel as attached to Ethan Hunt in this one, and I think that's the main reason. They didn't spend enough time developing his character. I mean, it's a shame, really, but that's not to say it's bad. It's a good movie. It's entertaining, and I think it will keep you entertained for a couple of hours, and it's a important movie in the series in terms of introducing the Syndicate and Solomon Lane, and it's almost like a bridge film. It's almost like a filler sort of setup movie for the next one, but that's just my opinion. So, overall, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, it's a decent movie, but it's probably one of my least favourite ones of the series. It's one of the weaker ones, but I still enjoy the movie, and I still think it's fun, but I wish it was on the same level as some of the other ones. So my final rating for this movie is a decent 7 out of 10. Yeah, I was kind of expecting more, to be honest. I hadn't seen it for quite a long time, but there we are. So, that's my review of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. What do you think of this film? Please comment down below and let me know. Please hit the like and subscribe button for more content in the future. Stay tuned next time when I review the 6th film in this series, Mission Impossible Fallout. We're getting very close to Dead Reckoning Part 1. So until next time, I'm Pajak's Perspective. See ya. Bye for now.